darlings, how's it going? My name is Craig, and welcome to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Top 5. Today, I'm going to be going over my personal top 5 struggles of a broke Yu-Gi-Oh! Player, being me, at least as until recently when I started to get a little bit of money back in. But I've been broke for a very long time in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And there are quite a lot of struggles that you go through. I'm sure many of you have experienced it yourselves. So let's go ahead and cover my personal top 5 struggles of a player that is broke. Coming in at number 5 is something that might not come up too often for a lot of you, but for me personally is, I don't have many friends to play with in real life, and I don't often have money to go to events or locals, so I usually play over Skype with a lot of people long distance, and making trades long distance is something that I've had to do quite a bit in order to get a lot of the stuff that I have, and being able to pay for the postage and packaging of making long distance trades has been something that's quite a struggle for me. It's quite a minor one really, and a lot of people that I know that play the game do have people much closer to them that they can trade with. Heck, even in the same country. I really haven't had many people to trade with in the same fucking country as me. I usually have to trade with people in the US. And that's quite an issue when it comes to paying for postage. It's not too expensive or anything, but it still is more than you'd like to pay just to have the privilege of trading with someone. But every so often I come across the struggle of, hey, I really want to make this trade with someone. They have what I want, I have what they want, it's perfect, but I don't have the money to ship until like maybe a week later, and by then they might have traded that stuff. So occasionally that does become quite a big struggle for me. Not a huge one, but definitely something that makes the list for me and comes in at number 5. Having to use filler. Now, this one can kind of be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. For me, I haven't had a whole lot of luck with it, it's been kind of a bad experience. But having to use filler is something I'm sure a lot of us do. It's either because cards aren't quite TCG legal yet, so we have to put, some filler stuff in there, or we just don't have the money, which is what this is referring to, of course. Having to use filler is generally considered a bad thing because we call it filler. Basically meaning we have to pad out our decks with cards that we wouldn't use otherwise because of monetary reasons usually. And for me, that's been a bad thing. I know a lot of people, when they build decks and they don't quite have the money for the more expensive cards, they have to use filler, and that can sometimes be a good thing because you find, little gems that really work with the deck and you end up maining them as opposed to them being filler. And sometimes it can be a good thing, you can really find those obscure cards that work with the deck because you have to use them for filler. But for me, it's always kind of been a negative experience. I usually lose when I use filler because I'll draw the filler card, and if I would have drawn the card that I wanted it to be, I would have won, but then I lose because it's the filler card. And it's just, I've never had a whole lot of luck with filler cards. I've had some cute little gems pop up and that I've started maining when I do play filler sometimes, but for the most part, it's always kind of been a bad experience for me, and that's why it comes in at number 4. This is something I'm sure we have all experienced, having to buy new sleeves, especially when you're someone like me who has all of, I have about 7 playable decks right now, but on average I'll usually have like at least 10 fully built complete playable decks, and having to constantly buy new sleeves for all of those decks is a nightmare. Resleeving them is fine. I actually find that quite a nice calming experience, but having to buy sleeves like every 6 months or so when you really want them is a nightmare, because sometimes you just won't have the money for that, and it's really an issue for me. It really bugs me when I have to play a deck that I really love, like my Yang Zings, right? It's all basically an all-foil deck. It's a lot of fun to play for me. But when it's kind of in padded up sleeves and that those little wrinkles you get on the top of the sleeves and everything, and then you get specks of dirt that's just white crud and you gotta clean it off. I mean, I'm not a dirty player by any stretch of the imagination. I'm quite sanitary. I wash my hands before I duel. I always wash my hands before I duel to prevent the build-up of that kind of dirt on your sleeves for as long as I can. But it's inevitable, it just happens, and it bugs me like crazy. I always want to buy new sleeves at the worst times. It always seems to pop up at a time when I don't have the money, and I hate that so much. This is something we all go through, and I'm sure everyone who's watching the video can relate. It's a nightmare, but there's really not much we can do about it. Just throw our money at sleeve manufacturers because we need the fuckers. If you're a meta player that plays like one deck every format, I envy you so, because I wish I could be that kind of player where I only have to buy one pack of sleeves every 6 months, but that's why it comes in at my number 3. It's just something that irritates me because I'm a player that has a lot of decks. Coming in at number 2 is something that I experience quite a bit. I'm not sure how many of you it affects, but not being able to go to locals or events because you don't have the money to travel. Now, for a lot of people, locals could mean just around the corner. You can walk to it, you might pay a very small fee to get into the venue or participate in a tournament or something, like an entry fee. But for me, the main monetary issue of getting to locals or events is I live in London, which is an okay place to play Yu-Gi-Oh! But when you want to go to locals, unless you know someone who goes to a place and they know how to get there, you're going to have a hard time finding a place sort of right next to you. At least where I am in London, I don't have anywhere right next to me that advertises online. Just the main way you can find a location to play at that hosts events and stuff like that is you look online, you see what you can find. For me, when I think locals, I think across the fucking city, all the way right at the bottom of London. I have to take a train like an hour and a half. I have to take 2 trains, it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours of travel just to get there, which is fine, but paying for that travel is always going to be an issue for me. You know, I'm never quite able to save enough because I don't want to spend the money on traveling to events to play my decks. I want to play my decks at events, but like I'd rather spend the money on getting product for my decks to improve them. So it's always been a sort of a really big clash for me. It's, do I buy these new cards to improve my deck, or do I spend the money on travel to go to an event at locals to play in a tournament to see how my current deck is? It's always been an issue for me. Those two things have clashed really hard, and it's a big struggle for me to always get to locals when I want to. I always have that big clash of new cards or event. So for me, that's why it comes in at number 2. It's always been a big part of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing experience, just trying to save that money to get to the event. Losing because you don't have the money to win. This is something, again, like the sleeve thing, I'm sure we have all experienced, and it kind of ties in with my number 4 of having to use filler. Losing because you draw a card that should be something else. Losing because you didn't have the money to buy that card, not because of skill, not because of a misplay, but because you didn't have the card you needed. That feeling sucks. It is a punch to the gut. It is truly something that I hate going through. It's happened to me a few times, not at events per se, but it happens to me quite a lot when I'm just dueling with friends. I'll lose because I just don't have that one card that I want. A big one for me lately has been Salt and Strike. All I need is 2 of them, right? That's all I need. But every time I get money in, I always think, do I either buy this couple of strikes for this much money, a big chunk of money, or do I buy all this other product that can help all of my decks for that same amount of money? And for me, it's always tilted towards, let me get more products to help out all of my decks than these couple of strikes, just to help the 1 or 2 decks that I would play them in. So that's something I've been going through quite a lot lately, and it's really a punch in the gut. I don't often bring it up or say it or anything like that. I usually keep it inside, but oh man, it eats at me. When I have something like a Fiendish Chain where I should have a strike, especially in my Yang Zings, every time I played them recently, I'll have a Fiendish Chain. I have 2 Fiendish Chains as opposed to strikes, and I wish they were strikes. Every time I get the Fiendish Chains, if they were strikes, oh boy would I have done so much more damage. And that bugs me like crazy. That is why it's my number 1. It's truly a feeling that you just don't want to experience. I'm sure a lot of us, again, like the sleeve thing, have gone through it. It's quite a common issue for a lot of players. Anyway guys, I really hope you enjoyed that. That was my top 5 struggles of a broke Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. If you enjoyed the video, please check out my other videos. I'm gonna scoot over a little bit, I hope you can still see me, and put like an annotation there, a little graphic or something like that. Go check out my channel if you want to see my other videos. I also have a top 5 playlist. I'll leave like another little thing down there. Have fun editing this, Craig, by the way. So check that out if you want to see more top 5 videos. And if you want to see more videos from me in general in the future, just go ahead and subscribe. Please leave any feedback you can in the comments. I really like discussing things with you, and I like seeing what you guys think of these videos that I produce. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care and duel on. So how's the weather? Oh yeah? That's cool. So it's okay here right now, it's kind of sunny. getting a little darker, but there's a lot of nice shadows. I'm gonna leave you with this. You can click that whenever you're ready. I'm gonna take the elevator. Boop. Bye. I'm just down here. I'm still here. I gotta turn the camera off.